And with that, and I hope you've all studied your economics so that you're following that very closely, because that's actually a very interesting point. Who would like to go first? I'm going to call on people as you raise your hand, so go ahead. And what you want to do is go to the mic there. I think that's probably easiest.
My name is Dennis Peterson. I'm a student at the George Washington University.
And where are you from?
Connecticut.
Okay.
Last year, Congress created a massive free trade zone in the Western Hemisphere with CAFTA, and I'd like to thank you for your efforts to make that a reality. Congress is now considering free trade with South Korea and Australia on bilateral bases. Do you think that free trade is always a good thing, and do you think bilateral is the way to go, or are larger trade zones the way to go?
And I would add to that one thing, which is, do you think that the presidents under whom you've served, or with whom you've served, have led as aggressively as you would like on that? So you may answer his question. And if you
yeah, because I think all administrations like to believe that engaging in trade, when done correctly, is a plus-plus or a win-win situation. We have the free trade agreement with Australia. We're working on one with Korea. Probably, if I had my druthers, a multilateral agreement structure. Used to be the General Agreement on Tariff and Trades. It's now the World Trade Organization, or the WTO, would be the preferable way to go. But the problem is that you have to get unanimity. And all you got to do is go back in our history and realize what would have happened if we hadn't have decided to, as the Founding Fathers said, become subversive in the summer of '79 and decide that 9 votes would decide things instead of 13. You just can't get things done. My most recent example would be the Doha round, in which we're now hung up on the multilateral. So absent multilateral, a good solid regional or bilateral is the only thing you have left. The Korean Free Trade Agreement would be terrific. One, Korea is a major country in terms of GDP and trade, and that it would be a real plus for us. It's also conveniently located near another major country so that they could get the message that maybe if you open up your markets, I mean Japan, if you can open up your markets, we'll open up ours even more. So Korea is very important. I hope we can get it done before the Trade Promotion Authority expires. Congress holds that power. We delegate it to the president, and it has to be renewed, and it lapses periodically. CAFTA was a regional agreement. It made all kinds of sense. We're trying to work on a regional agreement in South America, but we have only 2 countries principally, Peru and Colombia. Bolivia and Ecuador fell out of the Andean agreement structure, but we're going to continue to work on that. My preference would be multinational. My second preference would be regional. But if you can't do either of those, then you create useful, meaningful free trade agreements. The free trade agreement with Singapore, relatively small country, is very important because with Singapore, a totally free trading country, we created a negative list. Almost always in free trade agreements, you list those things in which you will allow others to participate in. Everything else is restricted. With Singapore, for the first time, we created a negative list. You only list those things that you can't participate in. Everything else is open to the free trade agreement, which means it's expansive because as new ideas, as new relationships, as new technology allows you to carry on activities, those would be available under the free trade. Only that narrow area that you agreed to reserve would be prohibited from the free trade. So the right kind of a free trade agreement is good. Basically, whatever I can get.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and how about you?
Hi, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jennifer Netto, and I'm a senior at GW, and I hail from San Francisco.
Okay.
My question has to do with education. Last year, $12.7 billion was cut from education, specifically student college loan programs. Along with making cuts, it also seems that Congress hesitates to pour more money into education, even though education makes our workforce more competitive in the global market. What is the rationale to these cuts? And are these cuts beneficial to our nation's future? Do you think that the increasing cost of college is putting a strain on the middle class, and how will that affect our democracy?
Well, number one, I'm an educator. That's what I train for and practice it. Some people say I'm pedagogic, so by nature, that's the way I am. Of course, all you have to do is go back and examine the student loan environment of a decade or so ago, in which the default rate was just enormous. And you're not going to be able to continue a program which people abused, because the argument was people would get the loan, they would then pay it back. That would provide money for additional loans, seed money growing up into ears of corn and being sent out. It didn't work, so you had to think about restructuring it. The other problem that perhaps you haven't thought about was how easy it's been for institutions of higher learning to ratchet up their prices, knowing that government was responding and providing more money available. No one was judging it in terms of content, in terms of value for the dollar. So to a certain extent, we were trying to break that relationship between a relentless march of dollars and the hiking of costs. As long as you were inside the scheme and played the game, you were protected. Taxpayers' money was fed to the increasing tuition costs. We think there are cleverer ways to do it. And just as the actual dollar amount to feed this machine has been shrunk, please examine the opportunities that people have now to put money away at interest dedicated to college tuition. How many institutions of higher learning and how many states are cooperating on enrolling people automatically if they begin the investment in paying for college? No one is against assisting people, because all the statistics show that the more education you get, the better the economic deal for you, but also for the society. But I think it's not just a dollars and cents issue. Education is knowledge. Being able to better enjoy the environment, enriching yourself, being more knowledgeable about your interaction with the environment assists us in terms of environmental policies and the rest. But it doesn't have to be a government dollar fed to an institution that has no conscience in hiking its costs, because they know more money will be made available. But to the degree people put their own money away at interest, tax-free, and expect to get something for their investment, I think you'll see a shift beginning to occur in institutions of higher learning. And I believe you're already beginning to see it. Take a look at Harvard's early enrollment policy drop. Princeton has just followed. All of these people, high academic achievers with money locked in, now being required to participate for a seat in a much more democratic process.
Okay, thank you very much. How about in the back row there? Maeve, how about you?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Maeve Carey. I'm a graduate student at George Washington. I'm from Syracuse, New York. One of my colleagues and myself are currently working on a project about congressional retirement, which is relevant today, certainly.
To some of us.
There are a number of works that have been done by political scientists that suggest members of Congress retire strategically. So basically, if they face a tough opponent, if their district lines have changed after a census, or maybe because a term limit on a chairmanship might be approaching. So I'm just curious what your thoughts on that are. Do you think that personal reasons usually play a more important role, or if it does tend to be more strategic reasons?
I think the basic answer is it depends. If you go back and examine the history, for example, of reapportionment, one man, one vote, back to Baker versus Carr, when you began to see the kinds of changes moving representation on an even basis, you saw a significant turnover. Partly the world wasn't the way it used to be. When you saw financial disclosure come in, and people realized that it couldn't be the way it used to be, and that you were going to have to bare your soul and you're going to have to fill out various forms, you saw a significant turnover, because people didn't want that imposition and they would leave. Certainly, you have what I call the phenomenon that no incumbent gets beat. I believe incumbents beat themselves. And so if you have a situation where you're personally in jeopardy, you may quit. Simon and Garfunkel had a song, 2 steps away from the county line, 1 step ahead of the shoe shine. And that may be the reason some folks have retired recently. Was that a way of asking a general question personally?
Let's make that more specific as to you, Mr. Chairman.
There's no question that the term limits on chairman has an effect on my decision. I thought term limits on chairman were absolutely essential when we became the majority for the first time because of the distillation process, 40 years of being in the minority, and that you needed the best people, not just the one next in line. Since there was no reason to wait in line when we were in the minority, except for reasons probably secondary to being able to run a committee. But when you go through the 3rd or the 4th iteration of this new majority, the argument that you must step down, I think, weakens. There are changes that can be made to allow for the reward of an extra term or 2. And we've talked about it, and it's under consideration. But remember, I was 16 years in the minority. I've now been 12 years in the majority. I was chairman of a structural committee, House Administration, and I was able to completely restructure the way in which the institution of Congress runs. I've been chairman of what I consider to be the best committee because I get a deal in so many important areas: taxes, entitlements, health care, trade. And we have some major policies that we've been able to institute. Now, obviously, I was lucky. I became chairman of Ways and Means with a Republican Senate and a Republican president. So if we were able to make law, we were able to shape it significantly. How many times do you want to do it? Add it up. It's been now 28 years, 14 elections. And so there may be 1 or 2 things that I wasn't able to do, which people will dwell on. I like to look at all the things I was able to accomplish. And that's why I use Sandy Koufax as an example. Too many pitchers leave the majors when they don't have an arm. That's the reason they're there. When they lose it, they leave. Sandy Koufax could have pitched maybe another no-hitter. He had 4, won a perfect game. But he quit. Why? Because how many do you need to do? I want to walk out of here under my own power, on my own terms. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm at the, some people would use the cliche, height of your game. But I've done a lot. I don't need to do more. Would I have liked 2 more years to coincide with the Bush 2-term presidency? Maybe, but you're running the risk of the off-year elections taking away the majority. There's always a risk. And so trying to stretch it just that much more isn't worth it.